Hello there, and it's Andrew here at the studio in Craigie Redroof, just working on a canvas which is measuring about 24 by 16 inches. In old money it's about 60 by 40 centimetres metric, and I put a dark grey wash, which is basically the sludge from my palette scrapings from the day before or week before, just to put a ground colour on, and it just gave me quite a nice sort of neutral darkish ground colour to work on for this sunset scene, which I'm using a photograph from one of our favourite beaches, which is Gwithian in Cornwall. You always get good sunsets there. That is when the sun's out, obviously. And this was a painting which was part of a commission. I was commissioned to do a painting of a sunset at Gwithian for a customer, and I decided to do two paintings, so they had the choice. So I worked on two at the same time, and this is the one which they didn't go for in the end. They went for the other one, which I'll show you at a later date. But as usual, using the same sort of palette as I normally use, which is the Cobalt blue, Ultramarine blue with a Cerulean blue. I've got a yellow ochre over there, I can see. There's a lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, there's a cool red, usually magenta or alizarin crimson. I like a cadmium red. And I recently just started using cadmium orange again. I just quite like it. And sometimes I put obviously more earth colours in, like burnt umber, Indian red, or a Naples yellow, but I don't think so on this occasion. And then I've got a titanium white and a zinc white on the palette, which is, I tend to like mixing the colours with the zinc white, and then using the more opaque titanium white to come in a bit later on for any more opaque applications I want to use to sort of make things stand out a bit more. This here I'm just adjusting and playing with the colours in the sky. So although I'm using a photograph as reference, I'm just using my imagination as well. The photograph is there to help me, but certainly don't rely on it at all anymore. I used to copy photographs fairly accurately, but not at all anymore. They're just a basic guide, and I tend to go off on a tangent, which I find much more fun, especially something like this. This was great painting to do. This was because it was not restrictive at all. It was just a lot of fun, just putting in colours where I wanted, mixing up as I go on the palette and putting them on the canvas to see if they look right. Yeah, and just having a lot of fun playing around. And when I start the painting, I tend to use it fairly dry. I don't really water it down with or thin it down with thinners or terps, especially if I'm in the studio. I will use that terps to thin things down to start with if I'm outdoors, but indoors, if I want to use anything to thin it down, it's usually a Gamsol, which is odorless terps, and doesn't affect my health in the studio, which is especially in the winter and you've got the windows closed and no ventilation. You don't want to be overcome by these hazardous fumes, and sort of it does make you feel a bit sick, the terps indoors, if you're not careful. So with continued exposure, so you have to be a bit careful. But generally, I use the paint fairly, like I suppose you'd call it, just thick, straight out the tube, and then I thin it with the brush on the canvas by spreading it to start with, and then I start to build up the paint a little bit thicker as I go. Like at the moment, obviously I'm wiping that bit off with a rag there, you can see, but normally now I'm starting to just apply the paint a little bit thicker. I still like to use quite smallish brushes because it gives me these broken brush marks, which is what I really like. And this canvas is not my preferred choice of support. I usually prefer a smooth board with just like a brush mark gesso surface on it. And I do make my own gesso traditional way. I don't use this acrylic stuff which they call gesso, which isn't gesso at all, because gesso in Italian means plaster. So I don't know how that can be called acrylic gesso. It should be called acrylic primer really. Anyway, that's another subject. But yeah, the canvas is I had got a few canvases at this size that just needed using. I haven't used them for, they've been there, sat there for ages, so I thought, yes, now's the time to start using these canvases up. And actually I quite enjoyed using it. Some of them have got old paintings on which I've painted over, and so the canvas has a sort of has a second life, which is great. And it's great fun to sometimes use what is underneath, and it becomes part of a new painting, especially where you've got texture which is already built up in areas, and you can use that to your advantage. So here I'm just building up some of these, picking up some reflections from the sky into this sort of foamy water. Mixing up lots of violet greys, and I quite like to lay their complementary colours next to them as well. I just felt here the foreground just needed darkening to make more of that luminosity of the foamy water in the foreground. And obviously I needed a few darks going in where the waves were sort of breaking and creating a little bit of shadow. So that's what I'm doing now with a round brush, just twirling it round as I brush the mark on across the canvas. And this is all, a lot of this is all wet into wet, so it picks up a bit of paint underneath, so the colour's not too, how shall I say, distinctive. It sort of blends with what's underneath, so it unifies the painting. So although I may wait a day or two at this stage just to have a think about where the painting's going, I'd still like to continue with it while it's the paint is still wet, especially where in the sky. I do like to paint skies while they're wet. I find the clouds blend nicely that way. You can soften edges if you want to, a lot easier. But generally, yeah, painting like this will be done over 3 or 4 sessions. I tend to do the underpainting and then leave that. I do like to leave the underpainting for about a week or two to dry and have a good think about what I'm going to do next. And obviously I'll work on different paintings during that time. And then when that's completely dry, I tend to go back in then and do several sessions. And the painting, this is just lots of fiddling around with the brush, just adjusting as I go, making colours up on the palette, and really I'm imagining how I think it will look. Obviously I've been there many times, so I do know roughly what I'm doing. It might not look like it, but I do a little bit. And then I'm just having a play with these colours I'm mixing up, and tending to put colours in. I'm not making up new colours all the time. I'm not somebody who generally pre-mixes colours either. I mix as I go along, and and you can see I'm using, majority of the time, using the same brush. I might wipe it off now and again, but I don't wash it out with terps or anything or white spirit. I just continually mixing the same brush, so all the colours sort of are unified. And if I want something to stand out with a bit of a zing or something in another colour, I will obviously use a totally clean brush for that. So if, say for instance I wanted a nice strip of pure yellow or something in the foreground or wherever, I would use a totally clean brush for that, and a clean part of the palette. And I'm just trying to make some, trying to make something of the foreground, altering the colour a little bit. Back into the far headland, which is St Ives over there, St Ives Bay, looking across from Gwithian near Godrevia Lighthouse. There's a rigger brush there I'm using. I don't usually use that. They were in a big bag, seconds, and I thought, oh, right, this was in amongst them. And I thought, how can I use it? And I picked it up one day, and there we are. It's ideal for these little areas like this. You can use the paint quite thick on it and just drag it across, and you get these nice gives you these highlights. Also, that's the brush I use for signing the paintings now. It's the only one I've got that's left that's got a decent point on it, because of working on board a lot of the time. All my brushes wear out quite quickly and end up quite stubby. I'll probably get through more brushes than I do paint. Just some finishing touches here. Very thick opaque paint here, just to create that illusion of the highlight where the reflection is of the sun, just catching that water in the shallows there. This is where you tend to slow down here, just to pick out these last few details, and then you call it a day. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Please click like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more. Thanks very much. Bye for now.